This is BBC Two. The season of programmes marking the 50th anniversary of VJ Day begins now with the story of one man's crusade to seek independence for India during World War II. Enemy of Empire.
February 1942. General Yamashita lines the road with defeated British troops as he drives to take the surrender of Singapore from General Percival. Britain's humiliation is devastating. 90,000 men are taken prisoner. Half of them are Indians. The Japanese offered them their freedom, but they'll start a new army to fight the British. One man possesses the desire and the charisma to lead them. Subhash Chandra Bose. The year after the British collapse, Bose set center stage with the Japanese Premier, General Tojo, as they reviewed a parade of some 16,000 Indian troops.
I am confident that with the help of my countrymen in East Asia, I shall be able to organize such a gigantic force as will be able to sweep away the British power from India in conjunction with those who have already been fighting at home. Hour has struck, and every patriotic Indian must advance towards the field of battle. Only when the blood of freedom-loving Indians begins to flow will India attain her freedom. Inqilab Zindabad.
Those warriors were very short, only about 3 years of my entire life. As yet, they have affected me more than anything else ever has or ever will be. And I feel that our country would have been a different country if Subhash Chandra Bose had come back and had a say in the future of free and independent India.
When Subhash Chandra Bose was born in 1897, Queen Victoria reigned as the Empress of India. India was her prized possession, and Calcutta was its capital. The Bose family had moved to the city from a provincial town while Subhash was still a child. His father was from a poor family, but he had married well and had prospered as a lawyer. Subhash was one of 14 children. His father's success meant they had a secure start in life at a time when Britain's rule in India was at its high tide. When the King Emperor George V came to Delhi, the Raj put on a lavish display of imperial ceremony. Behind all this pomp lay an edifice of imperial government, the Indian Civil Service, the court, and the provincial assemblies. These institutions offered opportunities for educated men, and Subhash followed his brother to university in Calcutta.
In 1916, a professor at Presidency College was thought by some of the students, including Subhash Bose, to have insulted Indians and said that the British were civilizing the Indians in the same way that the Romans had civilized barbarians. And some of these well-educated young men, bright, widely read, didn't take kindly to that. And several of the students attacked Professor Oaten. And Subhash Bose, whether he had actually hit him or not, was involved and was thrown out of Presidency College.
It was his first taste of trouble. He eventually took his degree at another college, but an army cadet training camp was to make a more lasting impression on him. He discovered that Indians in uniform were treated with more respect by the British. While Bose received cadet training, Indian troops had been fighting for the British in the First World War. In India, Mahatma Gandhi had emerged as the leader of the nationalist movement, spearheaded by the Indian National Congress. Gandhi pioneered political agitation by the masses, using non-violent non-cooperation with the British. This type of civil disobedience was in part a response to violence in British rule. In 1919, British troops had massacred 279 unarmed Indian civilians who gathered in the city of Amritsar in defiance of a ban on demonstrations. Later the same year, Subhash left India for the first time. His father sent him to Cambridge to prepare for the entrance exam for the elite Indian civil service. Cambridge revealed a different world to Bose. He wrote home,
Nothing makes me happier than to be served by whites and to watch them clean my shoes. Students here have status, and the way professors treat them is different. One can see here how man should treat his fellow man.
Bose's exam result was outstanding. It was a turning point in his life. It was also the start of his political career. He decided to dedicate himself to the nationalist cause against the British Raj. He worked for the Indian National Congress, and by the end of the year, the young graduate had been jailed for his Congress activities.
His father wrote to say that they were proud of Subhash. That one episode of jail going changed the entire, family attitude. And my grandmother, his mother, wrote to say that she was not surprised, and she believed that freedom can come only through service and sacrifice.
Indian nationalists were constantly being jailed by the British for their political activities, and Bose was no exception. Prison punctuated his life 11 times from 1921 to 1941. Despite the disruption of prison, Bose rose fast. At only 27, he was made head of the Calcutta Corporation. The British believed Bose used his position to fund revolutionaries. He was sent to Burma and spent 2 years in jail in Mandalay. He dubbed it the Kingdom of Dust. It seriously damaged his health, but didn't moderate his passionate nationalism.
I knew of Bose because in 1928 I had gone with my mother, who was a delegate, to attend the Indian National Congress session in Calcutta. And at that time Subhash Bose was the leader of the Congress volunteers. He didn't have any arms to give them, but he used to parade them on the Calcutta Maidan just as any infantry regiment was paraded by the army. But this caused a lot of controversy among the old Congress leaders, and they felt that Subhash Chandra Bose was trying to militarize the Congress, which was totally in disagreement to Gandhiji's creed of non-violence.
Gandhi's non-violence was a break with the tradition of terrorism in India, though there had been no big uprising since the Indian Mutiny in 1857. Bose felt that for Gandhi, non-violence was even more important than Indian independence. He referred to him as India's greatest man, but he was skeptical about his tactics.
He said, Gandhi does not tell us how to reach the goal. In other words, he may tell you to march in the street, but what if you don't achieve anything through that? Then what?
Bose was the first to propose that Congress should stop asking the British for more jobs within the Raj and instead demand immediate independence. His radicalism won him support on the left of Congress, but repeated periods in prison left him a sick man. In 1933, he was released from jail on condition he left India and went to Europe for treatment. But he remained a political figure to reckon with. Despite his differences with Gandhi and an absence of over 3 years, Gandhi felt Bose should be president of the Congress in 1938. The British let him return. At 41, Bose had become the youngest president. It was the highest position for any Indian nationalist.
Our struggle is no doubt a non-violent struggle. But even a non-violent struggle demands an army, an organization, and a machinery.
Subhash Chandra Bose's greatest appeal was his sincerity and his fearlessness. And he had a great deal of charisma also about him. He was very emotional, but he tried to overcome these feelings which he thought were probably feelings of weakness in his determination to do whatever he could to achieve the independence of India.
But Bose wanted a second year as president. This was too much for Gandhi. Nehru had held the position for 2 years, but only one was normal. Bose broke with Congress tradition and took it to a vote. He won, but he knew he couldn't run the Congress without Gandhi, and the old man was in no mood to cooperate. Bose resigned. It was a parting of the ways. Gandhi wanted to achieve independence using non-violent agitation and negotiation. But Bose now believed the British wouldn't leave unless they were forced out, using violence if necessary. With the outbreak of war in Europe, history seemed to be on his side. As Britain declared war, the Viceroy announced India was also at war, without even the pretence of consulting the Indian people. Bose was afraid Gandhi would now compromise on the demand for full independence, so he launched a no-compromise campaign. But he was jailed again, for the 11th time, for planning an illegal demonstration in Calcutta. He went on a hunger strike and was released to his father's house in Elgin Road. There he began to plot his next steps, choosing a 20-year-old nephew to help him.
This was Uncle Subhash's bedroom, where we met for nearly 5 weeks, night after night, to discuss the plan of his escape. And it was from this room that we set out on the 17th January 1941, around 1:30 a.m. I drove him in my car. After a nice drive, I took him to Gomo, a railhead in Bihar. From there, he took the train to Delhi and Peshawar.
From Peshawar, he walked to Kabul. After 6 dangerous weeks there, he obtained an Italian passport and traveled under the name Mazzotta. He traveled overland to Moscow and then by air to Berlin. Bose wanted to establish a provisional government to free India. He wanted the Axis powers to recognize it, and he wanted a declaration that their victory would mean independence for India. In return, he assured the German Foreign Office in Wilhelmstrasse that an assault on India from the outside could combine with the movement inside to expel the British. When Bose arrived in Berlin, Rommel had the whip hand in North Africa. Indian troops fighting for the British in the desert were among the prisoners. Thousands of Indians were transferred to a camp in Germany. Bose dreamed of raising an Indian legion of 50,000 to advance overland with German forces and drive the British from India. The Legion had a symbol, an anthem, and swore an oath of allegiance to Bose and Hitler. But only 4,000 men joined from some 16,000 Indian prisoners. It fell far short of an army fit to invade India, and it never saw frontline action. Both also failed to make any headway with the German government. Hitler didn't think a provisional government would have much value for his foreign policy.
He was extremely disillusioned very rapidly by the Germans. He spent a chunk of that time between the spring of 41 and February 1943 in Italy. He used to keep going down to Italy because Mussolini was in favor and was willing to support a tripartite recognition of the provisional government.
Bose's personal life was his only consolation at this time. He'd begun a relationship with a young Austrian woman, Emily Schenkel, during his exile from India in the 30s. They'd married before he returned to India, but she had remained in Europe. Now they were reunited, and Emily gave birth to their daughter, Anita.
Weiterzuführen, zu beschäftigen.
Both persevered with his efforts to win diplomatic support through meetings and functions. He rallied other Indians in Axis territory, and they made daily broadcasts to India. But he was stalled whenever he pressed for support for Indian independence.
Lang leben die Dreifachmächte und ihre Verbündeten. Lang lebe das freie Indien.
Both never had any sympathy for Nazism. He actually advised Hitler to cut the racist passages out of his political testament, Mein Kampf. Hitler had no sympathy for Indian nationalism. He told Bose that India needed another 150 years of British rule. He wouldn't even meet Bose for over a year after his arrival in Berlin. When Hitler invaded Russia, Bose knew his hopes for an overland attack on India from Germany were hopeless. It was June 1941.
Bose was upset by the German invasion of the Soviet Union. He realized that the leftists in India had a very strong feeling about the Soviet Union. And in the German Foreign Office record, there is a letter from Subhas Bose to the Foreign Office officials saying, your invasion of the Soviet Union will gain you no goodwill in India. Now, how many foreign politicians in Nazi Germany, in the middle of the war, would have made that kind of protest? I mean, he was really making, insofar as he could, a protest saying this is stupid.
Japan's unprovoked attack on the American fleet in Pearl Harbor completely altered the balance of the war. Hitler's fantasy of the enduring power of the British Empire was shattered by the lightning advance of the Japanese from Malaya to Singapore. One young captain in the British forces was Gulbaksh Singh Dhillon.
When the news came that we have to capitulate, Singapore is going to fall, there were tears in their eyes, tears in my eyes, and I think the sorrow was common.
The defeat sent shockwaves through the large Indian community. Devaskem Dasan was a student living in Malaya.
We felt as if the empire had collapsed with the withdrawal of the British and the occupation of the Japanese. It was so rapid. When the Japanese came in, we didn't know what to expect of them. The way they treated some of the Chinese, the slaughtering and all those stories when we came in. A fear set in. There was a total fear of the Japanese.
The British defeat in Malaysia, we felt, was definitely a turning point as far as India's independence was concerned. Because the might of the British Empire had been broken there, and that this was definitely an advantage for India as far as our independence movement was concerned.
Today, Colonel Dillon lives surrounded by the faces of the men who started the Indian National Army in Singapore. The Japanese assigned Major Fujiwara from the Imperial Defense Staff to contact Indian nationalists. Ras Bihari Bose, no relation of Subhas, was a revolutionary who had taken refuge in Tokyo during the First War and had married there. He and other nationalists living in Bangkok formed the Indian Independence League. They recruited a Sikh captain who had been captured by the Japanese. Mohan Singh was made commanding officer of the INA to be recruited from other prisoners. After the surrender, Indians were surprised that they were separated from the British and the Australians and were handed